Excited to continue our interview series. This has been one of the blessings of this shutdown period that we've been doing our services a little bit differently. And I've been able to reach out to some of the great wisdom teachers and keepers in my life and ask for some guidance and ask them to share some of their journey. And the person that I'm interviewing today is the fabulous author, Rebecca Winn. I'm going to say hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Isn't she lovely? Rebecca is, I have to just go ahead and confess that Rebecca is a close and personal friend for many years. And she's also really legit. Let me tell you about her. She is a multiple award-winning landscape designer. She has created a Facebook page called Whimsical Gardens, which has organically grown to over 600,000 followers. And it's really, she curates beautiful images and information about our beautiful Mother Earth, and a lot of horticultural images, but animals and great wisdom. It's quite something. If you love Mother Earth, you should definitely follow Whimsical Gardens. And in recent months and years, she has become an author. And her new book has just come out, and it is absolutely stunning, beautiful, heartbreaking. I have cried many times. I'm not even finished reading it. It's so beautiful. It is, it's just amazing. So welcome, Rebecca Winn. Thank you for letting me interview you today.
Thank you so much for having me. You didn't tell me you'd cried. That makes me so happy.
I definitely did. So, your book really is amazing. It's a series of essays. And the way I see it is you're telling of your own hero's journey. You're using your deep love of nature, and you have just this mystical connection with nature, the way I see it. And you're using that as sort of a poetic and metaphorical language. Am I close in describing what this book is? How would you say it?
You know, you're very close. And I will tell you absolutely honestly that I have always had trouble explaining my book too, because it's kind of genre bending. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a place in the book, I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, where I tell a story about my mother coming to me one time when I was around 8 and asking me what I wanted for my birthday. And I gave her this long list of all the things I didn't want. and she said, well, I didn't ask you what you didn't want. I asked you what you wanted. And I remember thinking at the time, gosh, what's the difference? But anyway, I just tell you that story, and there's a lot of explanation for that. But for years, I've told people what this book isn't. So I always say, it's definitely not a gardening book. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be into gardening for sure, but even really nature to appreciate it. And then I also want to be very clear that it does use nature as a metaphor, but it's not, there are no nature cliches. It is not your family are the roots and your friends are the branches and the leaves.
No, it's nothing like
obscure, connection sort of thing. So I actually am thinking of adopting your description.
Okay. Perfect.
Because it is a hero's journey. And I didn't really think of it that way until you said that. But especially the part when I was thinking about it, the return.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been on this path for all these years, and I didn't actually think about it until you said hero's journey, that the return, the bringing the lessons back, that's what this book is. And that is what makes it that. And so thank you so much for seeing it that way. And I'm going to accept that. Just say thank you.
Well, you have such depth, and that's the thing. The book just reflects your own depth. I meant to do this before in my introduction. I'm going to go do it now. There's this is a quote from Ariel Ford, She says, Rebecca Winn paints with words on a level with Monet, Degas, Van Gogh, and Renoir. I was totally captivated and entranced by her story. And then I actually love the description of the book on your website, which says it's an engaging, wise, and uplifting reflection on on human resilience and nature's ability to teach, inspire, and heal after an unexpected life upheaval. Can't talk. 100 Daffodils is told through the lens of the author's personal experiences with grief and heartbreak on her journey towards self-discovery and empowerment. But I think that's it. But I think the hero's journey begins to touch at a deeper depth. Can I say that? And I was thinking about this too. Even the images you curate for the Facebook page, they have soul. And as I'm reading your essays in the book, and I've started just this week, I downloaded the Audible version, and so I'm hearing your beautiful voice and your mannerisms and your quirky little funny things I know you do, which I think I would have heard reading it on the page anyway because I know you, but you have such soul, Rebecca. And the book really captures your depth and your soul.
Oh, thank you so much. I will tell you that, one way that people have described it is eat, pray, love in the garden. You can't say that in the publishing world because, it's like totally verboten to ever compare anything to eat, pray, love. It's not like eat, pray, love. Nothing is like eat, pray, love. But that's how a lot of people kind of encapsulate it as this, sort of woman's journey, although also you use the word poetic. When the book sold, it was kind of interesting. It sold as literary nonfiction. Now, I will confess to you that I did not know what that was. Because, I've never taken a writing class. I've never even taken a writing workshop in my life. I had never heard of literary nonfiction, and so I had to look that up. But what it is do you know what it is? It's nonfiction that uses the tools of fiction, so metaphor and alliteration and analogy and that kind of thing. So there, it does have this literary quality. I have learned, now I know what that means. That's actually what my agent has always seen it as. And she compared it to Mary Oliver's Upstream, which I will tell you that in my, I don't know if all heroes' journeys do this, but mine kind of does like this. Eventually, I think I make it all around, but it keeps going back. When she wanted me to use Mary Oliver's Upstream as a comparable in the book proposal, I looked at that and I said to myself, you have got to be out of your mind. There is no way that I would compare my writing to Mary Pulitzer Prize winning Oliver. And I did not write another word for 14 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I hit my own glass ceiling so hard, I knocked myself out. And it took me a really long time, and that's a whole other kind of long story that I won't tell right now, but to come around to being able to even accept that anybody, and not just anybody, but a big A-list New York literary agent said, no, you're not comparing your book to, I had used these books of inspirational essays. She was like, no, this is literary.
It's art. But I don't want to say art that scare people away. It's the kind of, it draws people in. It's so full of soul. I keep going back to that word. I want to go to the question I shared with you. Your essay on letting go, I think it captures both of these things beautifully for me, because it's so completely authentic, and you share your heartache. But what you do is you create a beautiful artistic expression where you're comparing the end and the loss of your marriage, and you weave it back and forth with the devastating losses that you, this incredible gardener and designer, experienced in your own gorgeous garden, which I've been in many times, that you were having all of these losses from the huge droughts, and then from disease, the roses. It was just heartbreaking the way you described it. And then you move those two experiences of loss, and then you come to, at the end of that essay, you talk about finding that there are other possible perspectives to hold. And that felt like a real turn in not only the way that, and it's not a linear story, the way you put the book together either, but it's just, there was something that just really shifted and opened. And I wondered if you wanted to, here I'm just talking about your book. Do you want to talk about your book now?
No, I like for you to talk about it. Well, that story, man, I can still feel that day that arborist came into my garden and said, "Oh gosh, that you've got that rose disease. That's too bad." Because I had over 60 roses in my garden, and some of them were, 7 feet tall, and they created walls that designated little rooms in my garden. I mean, my roses were a defining feature in the design of my garden. But that story at its heart, it's about attachment. Mm-hmm. It's about the meaning that we give to things, because I had given an enormous amount of meaning to my garden. And it's about resistance, which is really like the fraternal twin sister of attachment. And then it's about, surrender and a willingness to, there has to be a willingness before you can surrender. There has to be a willingness before you can perspective. At least that's my experience. And I think it's also kind of a story about falling into a place of faith or trust. Because I think that's how it ends, right? That I trust that that it's all going to be okay.
Yeah,
but
I think you had said that there are two possible perspectives, which either one gave you a sense of relief. That mm-hmm. One is that you wouldn't be able to keep the home, and but that somehow that the loss of your garden made it easier. It was, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it was just you had just opened yourself to new possibilities. It was you had accepted life on life's terms, which is kind of a 12-step term, but it means a lot to me. And I find that a lot of your stories, and we share a very similar spiritual background, at least the last couple of decades. That's how we met, was in our spiritual community and our spiritual walk. And so much of our spirituality is about, I can control and create the life of my dreams. and there is a lot of truth in that. And the sister to that truth is that we also have to work with what is presented to us mm-hmm. and accept.
I have said many times that one of the most annoying expressions in the world is "it's all good." It is absolutely so not all good. But what it is all is valuable.
Wow.
If you're willing to let that be true. And I think that faith can be what you're left with when everything else is taken away, and that surrender piece, that surrender can look like giving up, but it can also look like faith. And that was where I landed, thank goodness, not the giving up place. But I do think that it's all valuable, and I've certainly been through a lot in my life, most of the worst of which is not anywhere in this book. But I think that the more willingness, we have to find true meaning, so we give meaning to things, but that's not necessarily their true meaning. I think the true or deeper meaning is not the part of meaning that's attached to attachment. It's the part of meaning that's attached to surrender.
That's beautiful. And for me, it's like I keep using this word, but it's like discovering the soul of the thing and trusting what is here, the soul of the roses dying, the meaning of what the situation is, and trusting something there. And that's another big part of this journey that you trace, is that, you were kind of set up to be the Highland Park or the Park Cities, wife and mom, and you had this kind of, you were sort of trained and prepared by your family and your culture to be one thing, and then life changed, and that wasn't the life. And so your journey of finding your own soul's shape and discovering your authentic path and expression, that's a big part of the story that you talk about too.
Yeah, and I was a good little girl. I wanted people to, tell me I was good, and I wanted to be what my mother wanted me to be. I adored my mother. I say in there, I wanted to be like my mother. I didn't have any other real examples to look at, and I adored her. I wasn't pushing against any of that. That being said, I never really fully fit into all of that, and I think I was always a little bit forgiven, because people would say, oh, well, she grew up in Europe, or, oh, well, she's an artist. I had these little sort of excuses for not being, exactly the perfect little Highland Park housewife. But it didn't really have anything to do with growing up in Europe or being an artist. It was always my soul's calling. I can remember when we moved to Rome when I was 6 years old, and standing in this cathedral, because my mother was, we'd moved to one of the most beautifully cultural places in the world, and so she was busy taking advantage of all the culture, and and I don't even know what triggered this, except that I was just standing in this beautiful cathedral and looking around, and I could appreciate the beauty. That's always been a really high value for me, beauty. Legit beauty. But I remember thinking, this is not God.
Wow.
Now, where did that come from? And that was really the beginning of the journey of spiritual but not religious, way before the term existed. But I was always a deeply, deeply spiritual child. I remember when we were still living in Rome, so I was still little, because we moved to Scotland when I was, 12 or so. We had a Time Life book. You remember those Time Life books? And it was on world religions. And I remember reading the one about Buddhism, the section about Buddhism, and how there were monks that would do walking meditations, and they would, as a part of their prayer, they would apologize to any tiny insects that they were stepping on that they didn't know were there. And I was like, that is so me. It took me years to come back around, to connect, that Eastern spirituality with, New Thought and unity and all of that. But it was always there.
Absolutely. And I loved when you described so much of your journey. And I think that, you know, that which stands in the way is the way, and that you describe that so beautifully so often through these stories, is that your the problem became the portal for you to discover the true shape of your soul. There's another essay that I just fell in love with when I heard you reading it to me this morning on my walk on Buffalo Bayou Park, and it's called Dark Luna, and you talk about the lunar eclipse and the way you describe that once the full glare of the sun had been softened by the Earth's shadow, you could truly see the shape of the moon. And you're very well versed in the Carl Jung, the Jungian concept of the shadow, and you talk about that several times. But really owning all of yourself is a big part of this story, warts and all, as my mom says. So tell us about that. How has this journey of integrating your shadow given you access to your own depth and your soul?
Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that you resonated with Dark Luna, because that is absolutely one of my very, very favorite ones. In fact, it may be my favorite one in the whole thing. And yeah, it's kind of abstract, you know, and so when I was having that experience, it was extraordinarily powerful for me. And yet it took me a while to be able to actually articulate exactly what my experience was. But that moment, you know, when the moon just went from, you know, bright, shiny, but flat, to this three-dimensional, complex, you know, fully formed, oh my gosh, it was so powerful. And I just knew in that moment, and as that more than any other piece in the whole book, my understanding of it developed as I was writing it.
Wow.
Because it was so, and in fact, much of this book happens to me at an intuitive level. And it's been interesting for me during all the, you know, interviews and stuff, because so many of the questions come from an intellectual place, and I've never seen it that way. You know, my experience of all of it, including the writing of it, has always been much more intuitive. And it's like I'm in a semi-dissociated state the whole time. I don't know. I don't even think I'm explaining it very well right now. But as I was writing it, and as the words were sort of coming to me, when I got to that part when it was like, oh, wait a minute. It's because when the moon was no longer, how do I put it? It was when the moon was no longer, when the moon was in shadow, was when she was finally no longer overshadowed.
That's it.
That was it. And when I was like, yes, that's it. You know, but we, you know, as people, I think, and especially, you know, when you're writing or communicating, you have to be able to put it into words. But these experiences, because they're mystical, right? They really are mystical experiences, which I hadn't even put that word on it until just this minute. But I think mystical experiences are always extraordinarily difficult to explain. And so that was what was so challenging about this book, was basically putting into words these mystical experiences. And that one was one of the most powerful for me. So I don't know, did I answer your question, or did I just talk about it?
Well, no, you did. I like that you kind of went off to the way that it feels to me is it is absolutely mystical, but it's a whole experience. You're receiving it in your body, in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, and in your relationship to the earth, to the cosmos. It's big, it is mystical. And then and that's what the gift of the true poet is able to do. I mean, I love that your agent compared you to Mary Oliver, because one of my favorite poems is This Summer's Day, when she talks about the grasshopper. No, this grasshopper resting in my hand. There's something, that's what it is. You're a mystic. We've just decided. There you go. I love it. So I know that we want to just do a couple more things here. I just have one more question, and it's a big one. And this book is very brave, Rebecca. You really do reveal the difficult things you went through, and the difficult experiences, the betrayal, the abandonment. You talk about loss, just huge losses that you've experienced in your life. And I don't want to give away the climax of the book, but it really is a journey of coming to love yourself. That's what's being asked for all of this. It's letting go of blaming anyone else for your life. And when we were talking about this, and I'll edit out this question if you don't want me to get your answer, but I think that coming to love ourselves is so difficult. And that is exactly what the true spiritual journey is about. Why is it so hard to love ourselves?
Oh, Michael. I think that there are a lot of barriers to loving ourselves, and I also think that there are a lot of confusing messages about what that even is. Because we are told that to be lovable, you have to meet certain criteria, and so many of those now are aesthetic. And so I think for a lot of us, it's hard to even get past that messaging to even get to the real question of, what is lovable about me? I know that in my particular case, I was straight up told I wasn't lovable. So that's a lot to overcome, especially when those messages come to you when you're little bitty, and, from people that you believe and trust, and whose role in your life is to help form who you become. And so in my case, as you know now, there was the abusive grandmother, who I still to this day, when I bring what I think is some new situation to therapy, when we excavate it long enough, it's always bonbon. It always is. The difference for me now is that instead of going, God, it's bonbon again, how have I not healed that yet? It's more like, oh, there she is, my greatest teacher. So I think that in the most sort of meta way possible, no one loved me more than Bonbon, because she was willing to be the teacher that would force the issues over and over and over and over and over until I could find the people in my life like you who would mirror back to me the things that were lovable. And then I was able to finally embrace those. So I think that the reason that it's difficult to love ourselves is probably different for everyone, just like every spiritual path is unique to the seeker. But that's what it was for me. And it's an ongoing challenge. You know, I still don't love my thighs. But I do love my heart. And when I can't love all of me, it's very helpful to be able to look to people who I enormously admire and respect and trust, who have earned those things, you know, that I didn't just overlay them, because I knew you, you know, before you were famous. And
I think you're the famous one in this partnership, sweetie.
but I can look to you and know, you know, this is a discerning person, you know, and this is the light that he sees in me. And can I see that in the same way that I can shift my perspective about the loss of my garden, which, by the way, I didn't lose. But that's a spoiler. But yeah, so I don't know. Is that?
No, it's beautiful. It is. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I would love for everyone who's watching this interview to be able to hear some of these beautiful words. I've been just saying how beautiful they are. Would you be willing to read one of the short essays from your book? This one is stunning. This is called I Am Autumn.
Thank you. I will say that this is one of the very first ones I ever wrote, which I don't know why that matters, but I just thought I mentioned it. I am autumn. Fall is breathing its soft, cooling breath into the nights and mornings now, and I can feel myself noticeably relaxing. The relentless heat of Texas summers can be hard for me. Each morning in the fall, when I open my doors and the cool breeze washes over me, I feel my energy expand. It's a little early in the season yet, but as I take my morning walk through the garden, I've begun to notice tiny hints of fall color peeking around the edges of leaves like anxious actors behind the curtain backstage. I too am excited for their time in the limelight. Every street fall color is. It takes my breath away every year. And this year in particular, I welcome the transformation. It has been a year of deep change for me, and it came at a high price. Months of personal upheaval, processing, and self-discovery brought on by emotional pain, so intense that I felt as if my very life depended on understanding the cause, finding the source, and healing it. It started in late winter as the leaves were beginning to bud, then intensified through the spring and into the summer as the leaves unfurled and engaged in their annual process of ensuring the survival of their host. We worked in tandem, they nurturing from without, I nurturing from within, scouring the depths of my psyche for understanding, each of us gathering, storing, distilling, converting, day in and day out through summer's end. And now, as the breakdowns and breakthroughs are coalescing within me, I feel the self that is emerging is more my true self than I have ever been. In this way, I am autumn. The beautiful fresh greens we think of as the natural color of leaves is actually a mask of sorts. It's a sign that the tree is working hard. Green leaves are striving for survival by using the chlorophyll coursing through their veins and in the warm spring and summer months. Green leaves are processing and converting sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide into a form that feeds the trees, helps them grow, and can sustain them through the winter. But as the days shorten and sunlight becomes increasingly scarce, nature shifts its focus from gathering and processing food to integrating and storing what has been gathered, transferring it from the leaves to the roots. As this happens, the worker bee greens drop away, and the leaves' true colors begin to emerge. The beautiful, vivid colors of fall are not created. They're revealed. Most of the time, we are green leaves. We go about our daily routines, striving for survival. We spend our days and often our nights coping with work, with children, with parents, with all the responsibilities that consume our lives, trying to fit in some quality time here and there with our loved ones, and maybe, if we're lucky, with ourselves. We are bright, shiny, busy green leaves, doing what we must to ensure our survival until one day a crisis hits and it's impossible to continue with business as usual. In those moments, we are stripped of our ability to hide behind our busyness and are forced to be fully present with this new reality and find within ourselves, excuse me, the internal fortitude that previously lay dormant. Our lovely green facade disintegrates, and all those pressing goals and demands that have consumed our time and attention day in and day out diminish and sometimes completely disappear. In moments of personal cataclysm, something wiser, more resilient, more courageous wakes within us, bringing with it the necessary strength to confront our greatest challenges, no matter how harsh. In those moments, we become autumn, authentic, unmasked, raw, real, powerful, and beautiful. When crisis strips away our masks and guides us inside to our authentic selves, the beauty it reveals can be staggering. When we are unmasked, we are vibrant, we are radiant. When we are wholly ourselves, it is holy. Seasons change, and so do I. And right now, I am autumn.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Rebecca Winn. Encourage everyone to get a copy of this amazing book, 100 Daffodils, available wherever books are sold. We're also going to be featuring it through our affiliate through Amazon.com, through our Unity bookstore, but we hope that you will. I hope that you will give yourself the treat of bringing this wisdom and this beauty into your life through this beautiful book. Thank you, Rebecca Winn.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
And we will bring you to Unity of Houston for a book signing when we're on the other side of all this. But in the meantime, be well. I love you. Have a fabulous, fabulous life.
Thank you so much. I love you too.